is the Hall of Fame game cancellation an indication that the NFL season could be in jeopardy?
Nope, not at all. Not to me. Sorry, Max. Sorry, Laura. For those of you that wanted me to say otherwise, assuming that you do, I don't feel that way at all. First of all, let's take a couple of things into account. It's preseason, okay? I mean, people were looking for an excuse not to have preseason games anyway, for crying out loud. I understand the Hall of Fame game wasn't one of those games, but nevertheless, we all talked about how the preseason needed to be limited. Why put yourself at risk for safety issues when we were talking about concussions and various other injuries to players? Now you got the coronavirus pandemic, COVID-19, for crying out loud, where it's a respiratory issue that could potentially ravage your health even more significantly. No. I'm not concerned about this at all. As far as I'm concerned, it falls right in line with what I anticipated was going to happen. We're not going to see a bunch of guys out there performing. We're not going to see a bunch of guys out there putting themselves at unnecessary risk, which certainly falls under the category of a preseason game. Let me take this one step further. Injuries in football happen all the time. This is clearly not an injury. You're talking about a virus. We understand how potent that is in comparison to physical bodily injuries that take place. I'm not trying to draw the comparisons. What I'm simply pointing out is when we talk about the potentiality of guys not being able to play because they may contract the virus or what have you, in the sport of football, more so than any other sport, you see injuries happen every single week that end seasons, potentially end careers, certainly derails dudes for weeks upon weeks at a time. So if there is one sport that has survived by being able to afford losing bodies along the way, and I don't mean losing it in death and things of that nature. Please don't take it wrong. But if there is one sport that can afford to move forward and move on devoid of bodies, it is the National Football League, because it happens to them every single week. I'm not concerned at all. This is not something in the road that derails them by any stretch of the imagination. I expect the season to start on time. I expect it to go through its completion. Yes, I do.
Of course, this means the season's in jeopardy. It indicates that. And Ezekiel Elliott explained to you why, Stephen A. It's not about the players' health, just as the pandemic, in spite of irresponsible, selfish politicians who get contributions from big business and are therefore willing to put the American public at risk. Even though those messages go through, they miss the point. That's true. Most NFL players' lives won't be at risk compared to maybe even the general population, considering how healthy many of them are. That's never been the issue, taking personal risk. It's that you're risking the lives of others, the infirm, the elderly. And people have those people in their family. Ezekiel Elliott spelled it out for you. It's not so much us, he said. It's older people, parents, grandparents. Literally, you're putting their life at risk. It's not about personal risk. It's about not spreading the disease. And that is going to be exceedingly difficult to do. Those who subscribe to magical thinking or this imperative that the economy must get back will fool themselves into thinking, well, we'll get this thing in. I agree with you, it'll start. I don't know if it'll start on time. I think the NFL season will start. I think we'll get some games in. I do not believe they will finish. It takes the most sober view of this thing, the most careful planning to pull this off in the absence of a vaccination. Not just a vaccine, but scaled up, a vaccination that can be delivered to people. And I don't see that happening before, say, January or February. No. Dr. Fauci said that it's not a matter of if, but when. But even if a vaccine is available or created by the end of this year, it's not going to be scaled up in time to get it to everybody just the first few months into 2021. Hey, hold on a second. So, yeah. Hey.
No, I just want to ask Max Fauci something on a personal level, Mr. Max Fauci. Have you been around, your boys, your family members and stuff like that? How many people have you not seen over the last few months?
I haven't seen really almost anybody personally. We FaceTime and stuff. I haven't had personal interaction.
But you're still, but but you're still showing up to work. What I'm trying to say to you is this. You know to some degree, you know my family situation. Like, for example, my sister that's been battling, kidney failure for years and stuff. I've seen her once in 3.5 months. Now, I talk to her all the time. I talk to my sister Linda all the time, but I've seen her once in 3.5 months. When we talk about these NFL players, you're already planning on not having fans in attendance. So the point that I'm trying to make was when you bring up family members and things of that nature, I'm assuming we all understand that you have to engage in social distancing, and there's a lot of people that you're not going to be around
Stephen
if you're an NFL player.
That's right. Social distancing you have to engage in, but it's not. But how do you do that when you get 100 people together plus for every single game, especially when at this moment the NFL still wants a decentralized plan? The NBA has a much more sober view. Let's create a bubble where you're not going to be able to see your family members for a while. Everyone gets tested multiple times. You can't get in and out so easily. And by the way, then, because the NBA has apparently been inflexible about Orlando, where coronavirus cases are spiking in Florida, even now, I'm a little less confident than I was a week ago that the NBA finishes its season and they're almost done with their season. Well, that's the point.
To be clear,
excruciating planning.
To be clear, I only brought up the point that I brought up because you mentioned the family members of NFL players. That's the only reason I brought up the point that I was making. I'm saying that the family issue is a separate issue. Now you brought in the fact that the NFL players are going to be around one another. And that takes me back to my original point about, listen, you got to deal with it. Go ahead. Let me understand you. Go ahead.
No, I'm not. No. But if they're not in a bubble, then they will be around family members. But beyond that, even, it can be they can be vectors for the disease when you have several hundred people together in the same space. And especially when people start to test positive, if there is no bubble where they can immediately be quarantined, if it is decentralized, that can actually help spread a disease during a pandemic.